They laughed at him, mocked him, and told him his ideas would never work, that he was just another dreamer with no power, no backing, and no chance to make a difference. But what they didn't know was that every insult, every smirk, every moment of being dismissed was fueling something far greater than they could ever imagine, because Anthony Carter wasn't just a man with a dream, he was a man with a vision born out of pain, born out of watching the world around him spin with injustice, and born out of the countless nights where the glow of his computer screen was his only companion as he worked tirelessly to create something that could not just change his life, but save lives. Anthony grew up in Baltimore, in a neighborhood where the police patrolled more often than the trash collectors, where kids learned early that survival meant keeping your head down, and where the adults whispered names of young men who had been stopped, beaten, or worse, names that would never make the evening news, names that would never trend on social media, names that would fade unless someone remembered them. And Anthony remembered them. He remembered his cousin Malik, stopped for matching a description, shoved against a car, cuffed, humiliated, only to be released hours later with no apology. He remembered his neighbor Mr. Johnson, a middle-aged man with a kind smile, who was tackled in front of his children during a traffic stop that was supposedly for a broken taillight. He remembered his own experiences too, the time he was slammed against a wall just for walking home late with a hoodie on, the time an officer sneered at him and asked if he was looking for trouble, when all he carried was his backpack full of books from the library. These weren't isolated memories, they were scars that had hardened into determination. But the world didn't see Anthony's determination. The world only saw an awkward young black man with big glasses, hand-me-down sneakers, and a head full of tech ideas nobody believed in. In high school, when he said he wanted to code apps, his classmates laughed. "Man, you ain't no Zuckerberg," they said. "You ain't even got a laptop that works half the time." In college, when he presented a class project about creating community-driven reporting tools for police interactions, even his professor raised an eyebrow and said, "It's ambitious, but maybe too ambitious for you." Everywhere he turned, people underestimated him. At his part-time job in a local electronics store, his coworkers teased him for scribbling app designs in a notebook during lunch breaks. "Yo Anthony, you building the next Candy Crush or something?" They'd joke, and the whole break room would erupt in laughter. He'd force a smile, but deep inside he was burning, not with anger at them, but with anger at a system that made his idea necessary in the first place. Because Anthony wasn't coding for fame or money. He was coding for justice. He was coding for his cousin Malik, for Mr. Johnson, for every nameless person whose cries went unheard when police sirens drowned them out. He was coding for himself because he knew one day it could be him. Night after night, he worked in his small studio apartment, the hum of his old desktop PC filling the silence as lines of code scrolled across his screen. He taught himself what he didn't know: Python, JavaScript, cloud storage, encryption, GPS tracking. He broke down complex systems into pieces he could handle, watching endless tutorials, reading open-source projects, tweaking, testing, failing, and trying again. The app he envisioned wasn't simple. It needed to record interactions in real time, store data safely even if a phone was destroyed, alert trusted contacts when someone was stopped, and provide a community database of incidents so patterns of misconduct couldn't just disappear. Every challenge was a mountain, but Anthony climbed it, alone, quietly, while the world kept doubting him. And then came the night that changed everything. Anthony had just finished tweaking the alert system when his phone buzzed. It was a text from his younger sister, Aaliyah. "Anthony, you need to get here now. They got Malik again." His heart dropped. He grabbed his hoodie, his phone, and ran out the door. When he reached the corner, he saw flashing lights, the familiar sickening sight of his cousin Malik face down on the pavement, an officer's knee pressed into his back. A crowd had gathered, some recording with shaky hands, others shouting. Anthony's blood boiled. He wanted to rush in, to shove the officer off, to scream, but he froze. He knew what could happen if he interfered. And then, almost instinctively, he pulled out his phone, opened his prototype app, and hit record. The screen lit up, and for the first time his code wasn't just numbers and logic, it was power. The app streamed live, sent GPS coordinates to his contacts, and uploaded the video to a secure cloud he had set up. He could see the footage capturing everything: the officer's aggression, Malik's fear, the crowd's outrage. It wasn't just Anthony watching now, it was witnesses, it was data, it was evidence that couldn't be erased. That night, Malik was released without charges, but Anthony knew something had shifted. His app wasn't perfect yet, but it had worked. It had done exactly what he built it for. The next day he showed Malik the video, and Malik stared at him with wide eyes. "Bro," Malik whispered, this could change everything." Anthony didn't respond. He was still processing what had happened, still trying to wrap his mind around the weight of it. He had built something real. Something dangerous. Something that those in power would not want to exist. And as he sat back at his desk, staring at the glowing lines of code on his screen, he couldn't shake the feeling that what had happened last night wasn't just a turning point for his project. It was a turning point for his life. But then came the knock at his door, sharp, deliberate, and heavy, the kind of knock that made his stomach drop because he already knew it wasn't a friend, it wasn't a delivery, it wasn't anyone he wanted to see. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. The knock on Anthony's door echoed like a warning, sharp and deliberate, making his chest tighten as if every instinct inside him was screaming to stay quiet, to not answer. But silence had never been his way of living, so with hesitant steps he walked toward the door, his heart pounding harder with each beat, the memory of Malik's arrest still burning fresh in his mind, and when he opened it, he was greeted not by a friendly neighbor or a delivery driver, but by two men in suits, their eyes sharp and calculating, their demeanor heavy with authority that didn't need badges to be recognized, though the flash of government identification they both held up told him enough. FBI. "Mr. Carter," one of them said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of something unspoken, "we'd like to ask you a few questions." Anthony froze, gripping the edge of the doorframe as thoughts raced through his head. Had they already found out about the app? Had the video gone viral? Had someone reported him? The agent continued, "May we come in?" And Anthony, not wanting to escalate anything, stepped aside, motioning for them to enter. They walked in with an air of control, scanning the small apartment with eyes that seemed to absorb every detail. The old computer on the desk, the scribbled notebooks filled with sketches of app designs, the whiteboard covered with messy code and flowcharts. Anthony's stomach churned as one of them sat down on the worn-out sofa while the other remained standing, arms crossed, watching him like a hawk. "Mr. Carter," the seated agent began, "we've been monitoring certain activities online, and we came across a piece of technology you've been developing. An app. We need to know what exactly it does." Anthony swallowed hard. He had two choices: lie and risk digging himself deeper, or tell the truth and possibly jeopardize everything he had built. Taking a deep breath, he said, "It's an app designed to protect citizens. To record police interactions, store data safely, and notify emergency contacts if someone is detained. It's about accountability." The agent leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Accountability," he repeated slowly, almost tasting the word, before glancing at his partner, who remained silent. "Do you understand how dangerous that kind of tool can be if it falls into the wrong hands?" Anthony's jaw tightened. "The wrong hands?" he echoed, his voice rising despite himself. "Or the right hands of people who are tired of being silenced?" The standing agent finally spoke, his tone firm. "We're not here to debate morality. We're here to warn you. Technology like this will attract attention, not just from us, but from people you don't want knocking on your door." Anthony clenched his fists, his anger warring with fear. "So what are you saying? That I should stop? That people shouldn't have a way to protect themselves?" The agents exchanged a look before the seated one leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. "We're saying, be careful. Because once this gets out, you won't be able to control who uses it, how it's used, or what the consequences will be. You're playing with fire, Mr. Carter." With that, they stood and walked to the door, leaving Anthony rooted to the spot, his mind spinning with questions and doubts. As soon as the door clicked shut behind them, he collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. He had known this would be risky, but he hadn't expected government agents at his door this early. And yet, beneath the fear, a spark of defiance flared. If they were already watching him, it meant his work mattered. It meant he was onto something bigger than even he had realized. Days passed, and Anthony kept coding, driven harder now by both urgency and resistance. But word about the app had already begun to spread. Malik had told a few friends who told others, and soon Anthony's inbox was filling with messages from strangers. Mothers who had lost sons to brutality, activists who had been searching for tools to fight injustice, college students who wanted to test the beta version, and even lawyers who asked if his app could generate reports admissible in court. Each message fueled him, each testimony reminding him why he had started. But with recognition came backlash. On social media, trolls mocked him, calling his app snitchware or useless. Some accused him of exaggerating police violence, others claimed he was anti-cop, and some even threatened him outright. One evening, as Anthony scrolled through hate messages, Malik leaned over his shoulder and muttered, "They're scared. That's why they're coming at you like this. It means you're shaking something." Anthony nodded, but the fear lingered. He wasn't scared of online comments. He was scared of what might come in the real world. And then it did. Late one night, as Anthony walked home from a community meeting where he had just demoed the app to local activists, flashing lights suddenly cut through the darkness. A patrol car pulled up beside him and two officers stepped out, their expressions hard and unfriendly. "Anthony Carter?" one asked, though it sounded more like an accusation than a question. Anthony stiffened, his pulse quickening. "Yes." The officer smirked. "We've heard about you. You've been making waves. Why don't you come with us so we can talk?" Anthony froze. He knew he hadn't broken any laws, but the look in their eyes told him this wasn't an invitation, it was intimidation. Slowly he reached into his pocket and tapped his phone, activating the app. The screen lit up and he felt a rush of both fear and power. If this was the moment, his creation would either protect him or expose him. But before he could even think further, one of the officers stepped forward, closing the distance, and whispered just loud enough for Anthony to hear, "You don't know what you're messing with, boy." And with that they grabbed his arm. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. The officer's grip tightened around Anthony's arm, rough and unyielding, sending a surge of panic through him as he tried to steady his breath, his mind racing with possibilities, his body caught between the instinct to fight back and the fear of what resisting could mean. And though the night air was heavy with silence, Anthony could feel the weight of eyes on him, neighbors peeking from windows, passers-by slowing their steps, some already pulling out phones to record, the scene unfolding like so many others he had seen before, except now he was in the center of it, no longer an observer but the subject. "You're making a mistake," Anthony said through gritted teeth, his phone still glowing in his pocket, the app running, recording everything, sending the video to cloud storage, pinging Malik and his emergency contacts, every safeguard he had designed firing at once. But the officers didn't let go, their smirks widening as if they knew intimidation was the weapon they carried best. "Mistake?" the taller one sneered, leaning in close enough that Anthony could smell the acrid mix of coffee and tobacco on his breath. "The only mistake you made was thinking you could challenge us. Do you think your little toy changes anything?" Anthony's jaw clenched, his fear slowly mixing with anger. "It changes everything," he shot back, but before he could say more, the shorter officer twisted his wrist, forcing him against the hood of the patrol car, cold metal pressing against his cheek, pain shooting through his arm, the flashing red and blue lights bathing him in harsh colors that felt more like a spotlight than protection. People began shouting from across the street, voices calling out, "Leave him alone. We're watching. Don't touch him like that." Phones rose higher into the air, capturing the moment from multiple angles, and Anthony realized that this, right here, was what he had built the app for, not just his own safety but the empowerment of people who were tired of feeling powerless. But even as the crowd grew louder, the officers seemed unbothered, their confidence thick with the assurance that they had always been untouchable. "Let's take him in," the taller one muttered, yanking Anthony upright, but just then Malik came running down the block, his voice breaking through the chaos. "Stop. He hasn't done anything. Let him go." Anthony's chest tightened seeing his best friend charging toward danger, phone already out, camera recording, his loyalty burning brighter than caution. And for a split second Anthony felt both pride and dread, pride that Malik had his back, dread that Malik was about to put himself in harm's way. The officers turned, annoyed, and one stepped toward Malik with a hand hovering near his holster. "Back up," he barked, but Malik didn't flinch, his voice rising even louder. "This whole block is watching. You lay one finger on him and it's all over the internet in minutes." The tension was suffocating, the crowd swelling, the air charged with the possibility of eruption, and Anthony realized something. This wasn't just about him anymore, this was about everyone there, every camera raised, every voice shouting, every person who had ever felt the sting of injustice. And then, suddenly, one of the officers shoved Anthony into the back seat of the squad car, the door slamming shut behind him, the sound ringing like a verdict. Malik lunged forward, but the crowd surged too, People yelling, recording, demanding answers, their voices like waves crashing against the authority the officers thought they held. Inside the car, Anthony's phone buzzed in his pocket, a notification flashing. Emergency contacts notified. Live stream in progress. Relief mixed with terror. His app was working, but would it be enough? The car engine rumbled to life, and the officers pushed through the shouting crowd, driving Anthony away from the block, away from safety, away from the people who had tried to shield him with their presence. Through the tinted glass, he could still see Malik's face, determined and desperate, mouthing words Anthony couldn't hear but could read, "I got you." His stomach twisted with both fear and hope. He didn't know where they were taking him, but he knew that everything he had built, everything he had fought for, was now being tested in real time. His app wasn't just an idea anymore, it was his lifeline. The patrol car sped into the night, the city lights blurring, Anthony's mind racing with thoughts of what might happen once they reached their destination, his hands trembling not from weakness but from anticipation. He whispered to himself, "This has to work. It has to." But as the car turned down a dark, unfamiliar road, away from the precinct he recognized, his blood ran cold, dread sinking like a stone in his chest, because it wasn't the police station they were headed toward, it was somewhere else, somewhere far more dangerous, and Anthony realized with chilling certainty that this night was about to take a turn he hadn't prepared for. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. The squad car's tires screeched against the uneven pavement as Anthony's heart pounded harder than the engine revving under him. The flashing lights now switched off, their siren silent as if the officers didn't want to attract attention. And that silence was more terrifying than the noise, because every instinct in Anthony screamed that they weren't following protocol, they weren't headed to a precinct, they were heading somewhere off-grid, somewhere no paperwork would record, and as the city lights gave way to the dim glow of industrial warehouses, Anthony's pulse quickened with realization that this wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was a setup. He glanced around the darkened back seat, his mind racing through options, and then he remembered. His phone. It was still on, the app still live streaming, broadcasting everything, location data included, to Malik, to the cloud, to anyone with the link. But he also knew this, the officers weren't stupid. If they realized the phone was running, they might try to destroy it, maybe even him. His body pressed against the door, straining against the handcuffs biting into his wrists, trying to stay still, trying to breathe, trying not to give away that he was 2 steps ahead of them. The taller officer glanced in the rearview mirror, his eyes sharp and cutting. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he muttered, almost like he could read Anthony's thoughts. "This city doesn't need punks like you causing trouble." Anthony's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his silence louder than words, his faith hanging by a thread that his app was doing what it was meant to do, forcing accountability even when his voice was silenced. The car finally slowed, turning into a gravel lot beside a nearly abandoned warehouse, weeds crawling up cracked concrete, shadows swallowing the building whole, and Anthony's stomach turned. This wasn't procedure. This was punishment. The officers dragged him out, their grip bruising, pulling him toward the rusted metal door. "Nobody's gonna find you here," one of them sneered, pushing him forward, but Anthony caught a glimpse of something faint, red blinking lights on a utility pole nearby, a security camera, maybe outdated, maybe working, but just enough to give him a spark of hope. He stumbled forward, his knees scraping against the gravel, but inside his chest burned a fire hotter than the fear. They shoved him into the warehouse, the smell of oil and rust filling his nose, the echo of their footsteps bouncing against the hollow walls, and then came the words that froze him in place. "Delete the app. Right now. Or things get ugly." Anthony's eyes widened, his mind snapping to the reality that they already knew, they had seen it, they understood the power of what he created, and that was why he was here. This wasn't random harassment anymore. This was suppression. They didn't just want to intimidate him, they wanted to kill the very tool that threatened their unchecked power. He swallowed hard, forcing his voice to stay steady. "It's too late," he said, his tone laced with defiance. "People are already watching. You can't stop it." His words hung in the air like a challenge, but the officer only smirked, pulling out Anthony's phone from his pocket. He must have swiped it during the scuffle, and Anthony's chest sank as he saw the glowing screen in his hands. The officer's thumb hovered over the display, ready to end everything with one tap. "Let's see how smart your toy really is." Anthony's lungs tightened, his body stiff, But just before the officer touched the screen, a sharp knock echoed from outside the warehouse door. The officers froze. The knock came again, harder, and a voice rang out, deep, commanding. "Police, open up." Anthony's head snapped toward the door, confusion flooding him. More cops? Reinforcements? Or something worse? The officers exchanged tense looks, and one cursed under his breath. The knock turned into pounding, the door rattling under the force. "Open the door. Now," the voice roared. Anthony's pulse shot skyward, adrenaline flooding him, because whether this was salvation or a trap, one thing was clear: the night wasn't over and the storm had only just begun. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. The pounding at the warehouse door grew louder, shaking the rusted hinges, and Anthony's eyes darted between the officers gripping him tightly and the looming entrance that separated him from either salvation or deeper danger. His breath caught in his chest as the taller officer cursed under his breath, shoving the phone back into his pocket, clearly debating whether to run, fight, or bluff his way out. The pounding stopped, silence falling heavy in the air like a noose tightening, until the door burst open with a violent crash, splinters of wood and rust scattering across the floor. Floodlights from tactical gear blinded Anthony, but then he heard it: uniformed voices, authoritative but not hostile toward him. "Hands up. Drop your weapons." The officers holding him stiffened, their bravado slipping into fear as real police. Internal affairs agents, their jackets marked clearly, stormed in with weapons drawn. Anthony's heart skipped, disbelief fighting with relief, until one of the agents stepped forward, his voice sharp. "We've been monitoring your live feed. Everything's on record. Step away from him." Anthony's knees buckled, not from weakness but from the sheer weight of knowing the app had worked. The thing they mocked him for, teased him about, doubted him for, had just saved his life and exposed theirs. The rogue officers hesitated, their arrogance dissolving in real time as the agents closed in, disarming and cuffing them, their own radios crackling with confirmation that the footage was already circulating through media outlets, advocacy groups, and lawyers on the ground. Anthony sat on the cold warehouse floor, chest heaving, wrists aching from the handcuffs now being removed by one of the internal affairs agents. "You did good," the agent said quietly, almost with a hint of respect. "Your app, it forced this into the light." Anthony swallowed hard, his eyes burning with emotion he hadn't let himself show all night. For so long he had been the butt of jokes, the target of ridicule, the man everyone underestimated, and yet here he was, alive, vindicated, and holding the tool that could change the way accountability looked in America. The next morning, news headlines exploded: "Police brutality app saves Black man's life, exposes rogue officers." Television panels debated its power, community leaders hailed it as a revolutionary step in tech justice, and families who had lost loved ones to unchecked violence began reaching out, their voices shaking with gratitude, with hope. Anthony didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a vessel carrying something bigger than himself. At a press conference days later, standing at a podium under bright lights, his once mocked voice steady and commanding, he spoke not just to the cameras but to the world. "They teased me. They told me I was wasting my time. But this app is not just about me, it's about every life cut short, every name turned into a hashtag, every mother who deserves to see her child come home." Tonight, we showed the truth cannot be silenced. The applause was thunderous, but in the quiet corners of his heart, Anthony knew the fight wasn't over. He also knew this: the world would never again dismiss him as a man with no reason. He had given the people a reason to believe, to fight, to hope. And from that moment on, he was no longer just Anthony, he was the spark of a movement. Never let ridicule, doubt, or prejudice silence your vision. What others dismiss as weakness or foolishness may be the very weapon that changes lives, saves futures, and forces justice into the light. The world mocks until it needs what you've built, so keep building. The end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths.